recorded October 14th, 2024. Good afternoon, Ray. Good afternoon, Rod. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Are you sure?
Fantastic. You sure?
Yeah, I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life.
Sounds like she has a frog around her throat. Ribbit.
Don't question how I spend my free time on weekends, okay?
Okay. She strokes
That's
there as
a
a witch.
good one. I like that.
I'm talking about frogs. Yeah, I'm cooking some frogs up today. I like the sweaty
Don't
thing.
talk about exes. Don't.
Yeah, and excuse all the noise, but hey, it's Monday. I think fall is finally falling. It's cool here where I am and everything.
Yep.
I'm at a remote location filming today. Not too bad, not too noisy. Folks are behaving. Everybody looks calm and collected. The kids are kidding. The bees are being. The birds are birding. Everything's good. So, right, you have a good weekend.
I had a good weekend. I think we talked about this earlier, though. So I had a really good weekend, which means that I got a lot of rest this weekend, which is not always normal, having grandkids, kids, and all the goofy stuff that goes on sometimes. However, I was able to rest this weekend, but I think I've determined that the more rest I get, the less, well, I think it's pretty logical, really. The more rest I get on the weekends, the less good sleep that I get because I've just rested too much. So I slept like crap last night. So I woke up today just like, oh my goodness, I can't do this.
Yeah, me too.
But this coming weekend, the wife and I are headed to Fort Lauderdale, Florida on Sunday. I'm going to meet with good friend of the show, Morton, at a conference. And we're going to talk about Copilot for security. And then another good friend of mine, my Russian hacker friend, Sergey, him and I are delivering a KQL workshop next week. And then all the community stuff. And we'll be, of course, the beach. Looks like it's supposed to storm all week. Hopefully it's not hurricane stuff, but we'll see. We'll see how that works out. But before I do leave on Friday, I think I mentioned this last show that I get to meet Lee Majors on Friday for my birthday, part of my birthday gift. So I'm actually
there you
looking forward
go.
to that. And I have decided which one of these I'm going to take and get signed. He's going to sign one of these, and it's actually over here on this side. You can't even see it. But yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's going to be a treasured item. Lee Majors, the $6 million man. He was also the fall guy, right?
Yeah, fall guy. He did a few other things. I remember there was one of those airport movies, except it was a space shuttle that he was in, and if he would have had bionics in that, he would have saved the day. But he was just like a normal guy in that one.
Yep. He played in another movie. He was a cop. A series actually. It was pretty good. Well, everything was good in the '70s because back in the day when TV shows had substance, remember a thing that's gone away that they used to have a theme song. You could play the theme song from The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby, and you would know that was the Hulk that was playing. Or I think that sort of went away. With like Friends had it. Now the shows just come on, right? You don't know what it is, but you could literally turn your back and identify that. I went to a party where you had to identify the sitcom the fastest by the opening theme song. Like Three's Company had a great one, right? And all that, and then Maud and things like that. So
that was great. It's like every show that came out had to have its own.
Had to have it.
Yeah. And in fact, I'll admit just how stupid and geeky I am. I spent about a couple weeks ago. I started creating this playlist of more memorable TV show themes and movie themes, and that's I play them.
I had it running on YouTube. I geeked out too. It was just playing, and they're like, "Oh my god, I remember that show. It's pretty good." All right, Ray, what's going on with you, Ray? Son Ray.
Golden Girls theme song for me, and Three's Company. I impressed people with a mnemonic I made. How to remember my phone number based on the Three's Company theme song. So I was raised by television. Just getting that out there. How am I doing? What have I done? What was it? How have I helped the world? And what have I broken forth in the world? This is my therapy session. I'm closing out on my class for my master's degree in cyber ops. Her professor has to deal with me. We're doing good. We're chewing along. We're getting through it. We've got another couple of assignments due, and this is the last week. So 2 more classes after that, then I should be free. I'm working on some threat reports for customers. That's exciting. And then partnering with our technical folks, like our Defender experts, getting the research crew and then the analysts and hunters together for a public webinar. I put the short link as my little like headline there, aka.ms/Defender Experts webinar. It's a public facing event. Is really just a knowledge share. A bunch of Microsoft cybersecurity folks from Defender Experts are going to talk about the threat landscape for the past month or so, some of the more fascinating stuff they've seen, work on like practical KQL, knowledge share. So it's really exciting stuff. It's going to be our first foray into this kind of experience. And the focus really is on empowering and equipping others with just like how to think like a Defender expert and how to get into that mindset. So more to come there.
Yeah, I owe you one more fireside chat. I'll make time before I go on holiday, and then I owe Sachin 2 more videos. And
is this your project update?
Yeah.
Hold on, let me just get this.
Because it was going to come right like, well, Ed promised to do one more fireside with me, so I'm going to go ahead and get one more done. And I think you gave me the topic, so I'll figure it out. I'm just crazy busy. That's it. What have I been doing? Took some time off last week a little bit to try to find what I'm looking for. Still haven't. Favorite U2 song. And did do a little bit of geeking out and came across something that was pretty interesting, that if you are using custom logs in Sentinel from whenever you use a data connector, even if it was a solution that was deployed within the last year or something, you probably have some legacy stuff in it. Your custom log tables will no longer ingest data from those log sources starting next month, like that. You now have to convert that ingestion using a DCR. And otherwise, the tables won't go away, but they will no longer be filled with that data source. Now, how it will represent as an error, I don't know. I meant to have the link ready to show you guys. I don't think I have it. Let me see here. Yeah, I don't have it, but I'll get it for the show notes. So yeah, so if you have some custom logs or some log sources that you put in, they're no longer going to be able to ingest data as they are. You're going to have to go ahead and create a DCR to ingest those logs. You won't get any errors. You could run a workbook or a KQL query to look at all the data tables and query when was the last time that data entered that table. I believe there's a built-in alert for that too. If alert was used to going to a table and they stop doing it, you can get an alert. But I know there's a workbook for it.
I have an analytics rule for that, by the way.
Yeah. So that is gonna happen. I think next month. My apologies for not having that ready for the show. I'll get it over so we can get it out. That's interesting. That's going to affect a lot of people who are not using DCRs for custom log ingestion, or just to go ahead and manipulate the data into certain tables that they want. So that's a big deal. But I'm sure if you have one, I forget that workbook, and if you're not using a KQL analytic, it'll break your queries if your queries rely upon that table for results. Then you'll notice it then. But the data won't go in, so it's not necessarily lost. It's just not going to be ingested. So that's a thing. Made sure the last of my machines had MMA off of them and all AMA, new agent. So that's it. That's all right. I think we unless anybody else has something, we need to go ahead and get our guest out of the green room. He's in there drinking up all the beer, eating up all the snacks.
I wondered where that went to.
Yeah, that would be him. Hey, Thomas, what's up, man?
Yeah.
All right.
How's life going?
Life is fair, unless it happens to me first. Then it's not fair. It happens to somebody else first. Thanks for coming on the show. I know it's past most people's bedtime, especially mine, where you are right now. Remind our listeners where you're calling in from.
So it's quite past 11 p.m. here in Germany. So winter has also arrived. So we have closely 7 degrees. So
Oh, wow.
cold weather. But
Mhm.
I guess we have some hot topics, right?
Well, the hot topic is a project you've been working around, around your identity, your Entra project, and but I don't think a lot of our listeners support know who you are. You saw a big deal. I follow you on LinkedIn. You do all the cool projects. You want to give an intro of yourself to our listeners? Tell them who you are, what your superpowers are, and what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Thomas Naunheim. I'm a cybersecurity architect at Kanya, and also Microsoft Security MVP. I'm doing a lot of community projects, including EntraOps. EntraOps was originally started as a personal research project, but now I have found some time to publish that to the community, and has a focus on identify and classify privileged access in Microsoft Entra and all other RBAC systems that are very close to Entra.
Edward,
I think Edward's on mute. You're on mute, Edward.
Yeah, I was about to say, wow, that's a mouthful. He said it without taking a breath, and got it all out. All right. Well, I think we don't get enough guests who talk about the intricacies and the in-depths around identity, and especially now that that phrase has come back around. It was using it a while back. Identity is the new perimeter. The new attack vector is identity. I get it. You know, um, if I can break your persona, I got you. If I can impersonate you or make you think that I'm somebody I'm not, then I got you, right? So we got you on the show to talk about one of your cool projects. I've been following you on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Want to talk about that, but did you do that in conjunction with somebody else? Didn't you give credit you and somebody else was working on it? Or was it just you?
So EntraOps was mostly some of my personal research. I started to make it public to the community, so there has been also some comments from the community because the project includes some classification model, and it's hard to find a right decision what kind of directory role, for example, in Entra is high critical or not. So that is a great chance to discuss with the community. And I spent a lot of times on community talks, on conferences to present the model, and had also some feedback from the community. So already some influence by community members, and that makes it really great in my opinion, because there's no single source that know everything about directory roles and the classification. So I really like to get the feedback from the community.
Yeah, I think role creep and excess privileging is still a huge thing as these services come out. And then you started seeing retirement of traditional roles and everything, and warning you change them over, get these things done. I did it in my tenant, got it all out of the way. I didn't have a whole, I didn't have a super complex, identity fabric in the first place. But you go in and make sure nothing locks you out. So about your project, um, you and I talked a little bit earlier. You want to discuss it, and then actually you have something to show, in regards to it.
Yeah, sure. So let's see if it's working that I can share my screen.
This is your test. This is the quiz.
Yeah, it's always
Yeah,
the
we don't.
magic moment. Let's
There you go.
see, especially on the Mac, if you yeah. So here we are. So it's very easy to find the project. You can just enter EntraOps.com, and then you find this webpage. Would give you some quick overview about the project. What I really try to provide is a very easy way to adopt the EntraOps solution. So I built some scripts for automated setups. So if you have, for example, GitHub in place, there's an automated script to configure the pipelines, to have the workload identities in place for using EntraOps in a CI/CD pipeline in a workflow. But there's also the way to use it from PowerShell, because the core of EntraOps is written and provided as a PowerShell module. And there's a lot of integration to Microsoft Sentinel, which I will show in a second. So my approach is that you have a full integration to your SecOps, because when we are talking about privileged access, for me, it's very important that we have the opportunity for tracking changes in the role assignments, and having enrichment to Microsoft Sentinel to understand what are the privileges of, for example, of an entity that is involved in the incident, for example. And what the as you will find here, this GitHub repository with a lot of documentation, how to integrate EntraOps to your environment, including also, information about the integration to Sentinel. There's, for example, parsers to get all the data from EntraOps to your analytic rules, for example. And there's also a couple of PowerShell commandlets around EntraOps if you like to use EntraOps without a CI/CD pipeline. But let's have a look how it works in a GitHub environment. I have here my very own GitHub repository, so you can use EntraOps right from this repository, create your own repository based on the template. And then you have your own EntraOps repository. And from this repository, you have the opportunity to start pipelines. As you can see, there's a pull and a push pipeline. The pull pipeline will collect all the data, who is privileged in your environment, what are the privileges, and there's also a classification model around that one. And to make it a little bit practical from what is the benefit of that, if we take a look on a change, for example, there has been a new role assignment here. For example, someone created a new custom role called Cloud Application Secret Manager, and it is not a default role. So that was in a full customized role. And you have no idea how sensitive is this role, but also is it sensitive related to the target object. So what EntraOps is doing, I have a predefined classification model that defines that everyone that is able to change secret on an object in Entra ID, that is something defined as control plane. Maybe you heard about the tiering model that exists for Microsoft Cloud services called Enterprise Access Model. And I have tried to find a definition of this tiering model for cloud services. And now it becomes obviously that this person that have Cloud Application Secret Manager on this service principal here, that should be handled as control plane, as a sensitive administrator. Let's have another example. I have here the user Adele. Adele has become Intune admin role, and this Intune admin role contains a lot of sensitive actions. For example, she's able to modify all the policies for the devices, and also have the option to take privilege endpoint management. And she's not protected yet. So she has a role in Intune, and Intune RBAC will not be considered by Entra as a high privileged role, because Entra is just protecting users that have been assigned to an Entra role. And that's the reason why I have some automated response here. As soon as I have detected that Adele has sensitive role, she will be added to administrative unit called unprotected objects. And this administrative unit is a restricted administrative unit. And as a result of assigning Adele to this administrative unit, she becomes restricted for management in the tenant. So our admins like the help desk will not be able to modify and change the password, because she's now a privileged user and will be protected from lateral movement by lower privileged users. And same for other things as well.
So how do you go about identifying those privileged roles that weren't assigned privileged roles by Intra directly, but by it sounds like they were assigned this role by virtue of the workload that got deployed that then extended the authentication schema inside Intra. So how do you identify them? Maybe I missed that piece.
Yeah, it's all part of the classification model. So I have for all RBAC systems like Entra, Intune, classification model. For example, if we go here to device management, I have defined that, for example, if someone can manage all the roles in Intune, then it is something like a privileged identity access management. And then it should be handled as a high sensitive, as a tier 0 control plane management, and then it should be protected because it's a high sensitive role. And I did that for all role actions. So I not classify the roles himself. I'm classify all the actions. That is a lot of work that I did in the past because you have to go through every role action. And that is something that I did also for Microsoft Entra. You can see I did all the classification for all the role actions. And it's also important not only to classify the role actions, also understand the target. So if you have, for example, the permissions to change password for every object in the tenant, of course, that's high sensitive. But if you have just the permission to change group membership of a single object, then you need to consider, is this object sensitive or not, right? Because you need to understand the context of the delegated scope. And that's the reason why I built also some automated classification. You can see I have here some scopes included. And this scope will be defined by external data sources. So for example, I have integrated Microsoft Exposure Management to identify high sensitive assets in your environment. And then automatically all sensitive resources and the tenant will be considered as privileged object. And if you have delegated permissions on this privileged object, you will be also become privileged. So there's a whole, how I can say that, transitive trust control relationship that I identify.
So this also manages the creep or the drift over time as well, too, right? I don't want to throw us off the rails here, but Edward, this is your project that we were talking about earlier because this will feed into Copilot for Security, by the way.
This is it. Sometimes things work out. So Thomas, you helping me solve a problem. You and I need to talk offline about this. So fortuitous,
Okay, cool.
fortuitous is a word. So what is each one of these numerical and alphabetical strings represent? If I was to map this back to plain language, are they identified as an identifier for individual accounts, role groups, persons? Which one?
Yeah. So the whole schema here looks really complicated, right? So no one likes to work with this JSON file that you can see here, right? Because you don't understand what is this, for example, is the whole service principal application object ID that will be automatically collected by EntraOps because of the classification model. So what I found helpful, and I hope some of the community as well, using this raw JSON file just for tracking changes. For example, like this one, we had this discussion that Adele has been added to the role assignment. I have here the raw information about the role assignment and everything what is included. For example, here the information that Adele was not protected before. I have also the information that this is an eligible assignment. So I also scanning for all the PIM assignments and not only about permanent assignments. So I have also transitive assignments included. This is really raw information for everyone that likes to track changes as code. But I found it more helpful to have a visualization like this workbook in Microsoft Sentinel. And then you have, for example, some information like, hey, please show me everyone that has control plane permissions. And if I click here on the workbook, I get the filtered view. And here we are back with Adele. And I have here, for example, the information that Adele has tenant-wide permission in Intune from a transitive assignment. So it's part of a security group assignment. And she has become a member of a custom role. And this custom role has permission to manage those services in Microsoft Intune.
So you have to deploy your solution first before this workbook can pull the relevant information because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, right.
Okay, because if I was just to take your workbook from your Git and put it inside in my tenant and inside Sentinel and bring it up, I would just get errors and no numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the whole magic works behind the scenes. We have the PowerShell module that collects all the data from Microsoft Graph and other endpoints, export them as JSON. I can track the JSON file in my GitHub repository as code. But now another pipeline is coming into the game, and that is using a custom table or watch list, depending on your preparation, and ingest the data to Microsoft Sentinel. And based on the data in Microsoft Sentinel, you can now build and use, for example, this workbook or use it for detection engineering. So let's have a quick look into that one. I built a parser. The parser is using all the information that has been ingested to the custom table or the watch list. And you have now all the raw data here in this view in Microsoft Sentinel. And this gives you a really detailed information about any role assignment and also about the privileges that exist in your environment. And now you can, for example, search for information. So if I go here and say, okay, I like to see, for example, Adele once again, then I'm looking here, okay, it contains Adele, for example. And then let's see, I have here 2 entries. There's also some history information. And for example, here we are back with all the information regarding Adele. And then I can use the power of KQL for start hunting or exploring the privileges as part of the data that has been ingested to Sentinel.
Very cool. Very cool. And you were saying you were using it for some detections. Can we go back to the workbook again?
Yeah, sure.
So where would I be able to find drift inside your workbook, if any exists? I don't know if you put any exceptions inside of here.
Yeah. So the most interesting thing that I see in many environments, they like to see a tier breach. So you have your identity team, and only the identity team should have full control of the Entra ID tenant, for example, right? So what you can do, for example, you can have some classification on the users that exist in the tenant. So I'm using here custom security attributes in Microsoft Entra to define that this user is a control plane user, a tier 0 admin, and this user has also a relation to a work account because it's a separated admin account for someone that works in my company, for example. And what I can now do, going back to the workbook and checking, this is the classification of the privilege identity. And maybe I have some management plane user that are users on tier 1. And if they have access to control plane, because this would be a breach in my security tiering model. And I can see I have here, for example, also an application called Cloud File Backup. And this application has now Microsoft Graph API permissions. For example, this role management read-write directory that leads to a direct path for tenant compromise, because it should be only a tool for backup my files in OneDrive, but it has also additional Graph API permissions that has nothing to do with OneDrive or Office 365 backup. So I have not did only a classification for Entra and Intune. I have also tried to cover workload and application identities to see high sensitive applications and if they have been used for any API permissions that has been not designed or have been planned for the application before.
Very cool. I saw that you had service principles and biological representation, like a user there, but what about managed identities?
They are also included. I built a whole workbook just for workload identities and managed identities.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, if you go here to this workbook, you can also see how many managed identities compared to regular application exist. And one of my favorite is this one. If we go here to assignments of managed identities, I have additional pipelines in EntraOps that collects a lot of post-share information from Defender for Cloud and also Azure Resource Graph. And now I can go up here and looking for high sensitive managed identities or application identities with control plane. And if I go down, I can see, for example, we have here control plane managed identities and where they are assigned to which resource. And I have direct deep links to the Azure resource. It gives you a full transparency to see the relation between the managed identity and your Azure resources.
Very cool.
And yeah.
I was one thing I don't see is like, well, there you go. There's the time generated. To me, thinking from cybersecurity perspective and doing threat hunting, to me, I'm sure you probably have some rules for this already, but identifying when that happened, or if you see a number of changes, like one or 3 or 4 accounts that automatically got applied from outside the change management process, then that's something you would have to identify. This is great. The other thing about this that I was interested in, I think this applies to what Ray was talking about, going to help her save her voice. Are there any additional reports that you are thinking of or that you would pull out of this? Maybe like at a risk assessment that you could have something that you could send to, your SOC manager or maybe your CISO or something like that.
Yeah, so at the moment, there are just 2 output types. You can have the regular output in PowerShell and build your own filtering and stuff. So the workbooks are the only way that I'm providing for reporting at the moment. I'm considering also to bring some features to the Pester framework as part of Master. This is another community tool about security posture management in Microsoft Entra. But for example, for assessments, I'm a big fan of this tool because it gives me a quick overview about all the role assignments that exist, and especially if customers are using nesting, because sometimes they're using groups and so on, and they totally overlooked in their environment who has permissions or not. And same for service principals. I think many organizations have their issues in managing and being aware of high sensitive application permissions. And that is something where EntraOps have also some turn on the lights moment.
Yeah. I can see this because this data, number one, it partially exists in Sentinel, but then also the JSON format. This fits really easily into, and I swore I wouldn't say this, but it fits easily into Copilot for Security.
Yeah,
I have to say it because it's literally all I think about these days. But or Security Copilot for those that won't be able to be at Ignite this year. But this fits really well because we're talking about the reporting. So Copilot for Security or Security Copilot actually can generate those reports for you.
I was thinking the same thing. Can I use that to generate something? But negatively to between your PowerShell export or reporting and the workbook, I wonder how easy it would be to sort of pump this into Power BI and be able to come out with something. And if you got the JSON, you probably could. And if you if you got the query in the background for the workbook, you can then just run it and then export to a Power BI.
Well, Security Copilot, you just ask for a Power BI formatted report.
That's true. You can do that. Make sure all the back-end stuff is set up, because it won't tell you what is not correctly set up before it throws you an error. So I'm going to do a little 101 here. Can you define control plane and management plane for our listeners?
Yeah, so for me, there's a different interpretation of the model, but I would give you some thoughts from my side. So control plane is for me any permission that, for example, have full access to your zero trust policies, to your to full identity and high privilege access management. So giving you some examples, a conditional access administrator that have the permissions to modify any policies would be something that is for me assigned to control plane. Also, if you have a group administrator and you're not protecting your security groups that will be used for delegating or granting permissions on domain controllers on an Azure subscription, that would be also control plane, because someone that can modify the security group and assign themselves as a contributor on a subscription, they have a escalation path to become owner of the virtual machine that runs the domain controllers. And that's the reason why I integrated so much external data sources like exposure management, because if you define in exposure management your Azure resources like a domain controller as high sensitive asset, I can take a benefit on this classification, and then also take a note what are the security groups that will be used to granting the permissions. And then everyone that gets group administrator on the group that manages the permission on subscription should be also considered as control plane.
So you can also look at GSMA accounts, right? Someone's inside that group messing around trying to circumvent or gain access to MDI and do that.
Yeah, but currently I'm more focusing on the cloud side. So I have not visibility on assets in Active Directory. But if we have an example here, back to this is the JSON file that will be used for getting the data from exposure management. And for example, if a service principal has access to this managed identities, and this is are my managed identities for Sentinel incident response. And this has a privilege to block users, for example. That could be also control plane, because that could enforce an attacker or allow an attacker to block any forward access to the tenant. And then this service principal or managed identities will be classified in exposure management. And once again, EntraOps can use the data to identify these critical resources.
I think one of the obvious things I didn't see in the workbook, you didn't scroll all the way down. 2 questions around that. Since MFA is becoming the norm now and not the exception, we're being forced to it. I would assume that your tool can report on something that was created, which I would find hard if you have conditional access in to make that a dependency. But do you look at for those who may have some inadvertent way then put in a group that they should have MFA and they don't, and or around I thought I saw something where you're looking at also PIM groups inside of that also. So that's a good thing for those who have privileged identity management. So you can see accounts created that were not added to a PIM group inside your tool. Okay.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah. And for me, really important is the automated response part. So as we have seen with Adele, for example, so she was kind of guest user that has been granted to Intune privilege. And now I need to protect this user, because otherwise some lower privilege can take over the account. And not only about using this restricted administrative unit, she will be automatically added to this security group. And this security group will be used for granting conditional access policies for admins, for example.
Now that's cool.
Then I have also my coverage of conditional access for this privileged user.
Does your deployment from Azure automatically create the privileged group that you're using here, or is that something that needs to be architected out so you can name it yourself?
Yeah, but you can modify that one. So I built a whole parameterization around this one. So these are the options that you can turn on and disable for EntraOps. And that includes also parameterization of names and other stuff as well.
Yeah. Just for the average admin out here, who, if you're doing this, you got to have some level of experience.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the time does it take to deploy this? Like, I'm not a big IAM guy, but if I can break, intro with the best of them, how long would it take someone to go in, get access to your Git, and then deploy the solution on average a day?
So I hope that with all the automation that has been integrated, it is possible to set up everything within 10 minutes.
10 minutes. You heard that, people.
Yeah, that's my promise. You can see that here in the video. I had include a lot of automation in GitHub for all the stuff. But honestly, to understand the results, to customize stuff, that is something you need experience in PowerShell, you need experience in Sentinel. So it is something really for a higher, if you like to have a deep dive on this topic. But if you like to have just the export about your privileged users, then PowerShell module import, and then just starting with the simple commandlets would be something that works for every admin that is familiar with PowerShell.
Any particular PowerShell version? At least 7?
Yeah, PowerShell Core would be the way to go.
Okay, 4.
I noticed you're also, you talked about the watch list. I assume those are for like safe recommended safe accounts that you're not monitoring potentially, that you're pulling in. And if so, do you ever recommend putting accounts in a safe list that you don't monitor, or should you monitor everything?
So for me, I'm using more the watch list to cover the high privileged user. Yeah. But what I did as well, to show you a little bit context here, for the watch lists, there's a couple of other interesting stuff here. We have all the UBA stuff, for example. Mm-hmm. And what EntraOps is also doing is about identity correlation. So I automatically built the correlation between the privileged user and the work account. For example, if I have this user here, Miles O'Brien has a privileged user. That was the information that I built with the custom security attribute. And now this information comes together in the identity correlation, including the EntraOps data about the sensitive level, in this case, management plane. And for me, it's really important not covering only the privileged user, also the associated clients and the associated regular work account. Because if I have an incident on the work account, I like to see if the user have also a privileged user account to see other lateral movement paths and relation between accounts.
So that identity correlation, it looks like it's a command that needs to have a watch list or some data source to be able to pull that from, because that separation of those wouldn't mean that the person can, it's a tiered account matrix that you're using. So ed@msi.com wouldn't necessarily be able to flip over and then use _ed identity at msi.com. So you manually have to create that watch list and go back into your authentication fabric, and then manually, okay, this is raw admin account. This is Ray's regular account. So you have to, that's a manual process, but you can still export that and then just map them on the back end. But it would be a little bit of admin work to keep that watch list up to date.
Yeah, but as soon we have an attribute, and what I recommend is that if you provisionize the privileged user,
Mhm.
you put the relation to the work account to the custom security attribute.
Yep.
Because then it is also hidden for any regular user to see the relation, because that could be something that maybe is sensitive. You don't like to give an attacker the reconnaissance on this link relation. And if you have identity lifecycle tool, for example, with identity governance, you can build your own logic app that put the custom security attribute information about this relation. And what EntraOps is doing, it is reading this custom security attribute automatically and put it to the watch list. So this watch list will be automatically created as soon you have the information defined in the custom security attribute.
I may have to ping you on that and get some toolage on how to do that, because my mind is thinking about a use case right now, and that's going to be really cool. I just wonder how much of a lift to get that watch list. But you're right, putting the logic app to be able to associate that, and then they just have the identifier, not the real name. So you you you'd have to have access to both of them to match it. See,
Yeah.
and just keep checking to figure out which one it is, right? Because otherwise, if I see A_Rod, I know that's his admin account. But if I see this GUID or whatever, I don't know who it is. All right,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool there. That makes Yeah, I got some ideas, Rod. You see the smoke coming off the top of my bald head. I got some ideas
Yeah.
around this. I did have another question. So if I were to run, identity correlation without having a watch list, would it just come back null, no answer? Right, you KQL guy. Could you just run it and see what happens?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If there's nothing that exists in there, there's nothing that's going to come back.
Well, what threw me off, I have almost no experience in the watch list stuff. I saw underscore get watch list, and that is the parameter that's calling that watch. Is that the name of the watch list identity correlation?
Yeah. The friendly name of the watch list is identity correlation.
Okay.
Yep.
And all it's doing is just mapping the fields. Okay, that's what it is. Because my thought was, could I run this as a KQL parameter in Copilot for security, and it will come back and say, well, Thomas has 2 accounts, and one of them is an admin level or control plane level, but you got to have a watch list for it. Okay.
Yeah, so watch list is a very simple form database, almost like an Excel spreadsheet, but it has the columns and rows just like everything else. But you can use KQL to expose the data that's in there.
Yeah, watch list. Frank Grimberg's favorite product. Sentinel. Shout out to you, Frank.
It's still used today. Yeah.
It's an actual tile, right? And more robust. More people are using that than they're using notebooks. How about that? Nobody using notebooks. Speaking of which, what Rod? Did I hit a sore spot, Rod?
It's not a sore spot. I just
It is.
I don't know if I've heard that feature or about that feature in a long time.
I haven't heard about it in a long time either. But there's another question for Thomas here. Thomas, does your product interact with anything in Jupyter notebooks?
Not yet, but would be great to see some examples for that one. So maybe some opportunity to contribute to EntraOps.
That may be something then, right? Let me just take a little scribble notes right here.
Aren't notebooks or ML? Isn't that kind of like poor man's Copilot?
You could say that. That's what our other guest would say. What was his name? Mr. Disney would say that. Shout out to you, Mr. Disney.
Which one costs the most compute? I don't know.
I don't know. It's according to what you're calling us out to sell in notebooks, right? I don't know. That's a good question there. We need to get Mr. Disney back on. I hope he's listening. This would be super interesting to him. And knowing that. Oh man. Well, sir, this has been eye-opening for a person, who doesn't delve in identity. I don't even play an identity admin, on TV. But the way you had this listed out, this is called EntraOps. And I love the way that the identity team now sees more like a security team, because they're not mutually inclusive, right? If you split hairs, people are like, well, MFA is around security. Yeah, but not really. It's about identity management and access management, which could be security, but it could also just be this is identity management, right? But this is good stuff here. I'm gonna put your 10 minutes to the test. I'll give myself 5 more because lack of experience and see and do it. Can I put a support ticket in if it doesn't work, knowing that
Sure,
you're 6 hours ahead and doing that? Um, this
It's
this
called
is
a
good
pull
stuff.
request. Yeah.
A pull request. I'll put a pull request in. I got to get my get back right. Another quick question. Well, no, it's not really much. I was about to say why Git and not Azure Dev, but DevOps, but I get it now. You're talking about community, you're always talking about Git. You're talking about Dev, you're locking it down by the UPN and creating guest accounts and stuff. You don't want to do that. I get it. That was it. Well, Ray's been quiet. Everybody knows Ray's sick. She's a trooper. She came on the show. We're saving her voice. Um, Rod, you have any other questions for our guest? I got so much here written down. I'm a bug him.
Well, Ray has another question. It's in the chat, and I'll read it for her because I don't want to. Yeah, since we are trying to make sure she gets better by Wednesday. We talked about this earlier. She asked, could we use this as a vehicle to funnel hunting findings into it to cross-reference accounts that have been pinged on Hunter radar historically? Wow, she's been practicing her prompting. A long one. Did you catch that, Thomas? You want me to read again?
Not really.
Let's see that have been. Oh, well, you know what? Thinking about what she's asking here. She's asking about taking this data and some of those changes and changes over time, and then comparing them historically, right, to things that have happened. So more commonplace versus the outliers. So yeah, you absolutely could. Because you are collecting the data, so you do have the data to do something with it, and you can use KQL to, split the data and figure out and do that comparison. So you can.
Yeah, that would be working with your identity team to do some threat hunting. Like something looks, out of whack about a particular account, especially if I have a privileged. When you tell me this, Thomas, this would be a good question. Would this spark something on your radar that if I were in your workbook or I did your identity correlation and someone comes up with a management account, admin account, but no regular user account, that would flag, right? Was that possible? I mean, I'm going to go ahead and create this identity, this management account, but if you don't see that, or would that just be processed? Meaning, an admin could have an account but not have a worker account. Would that be something that would flag if you were looking?
Yeah, so that, in my opinion, that would be an interesting use case because custom security attributes is something where even the global admin needs to have dedicated permissions to write the information. So even someone has gained global admin and starting to have their backdoor account and is a smart guy, so the attacker followed the naming convention and it looks like a regular privilege account, but then having no linked back to a work account because of the missing custom security attribute, then we have a nice detection that we can.
You did all the things, but you did it manually rather than automatically. So now I see it, right? Like you went in and fubbed this and put it backwards to hide yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess that would make sense. Like you said, a clever guy would do that. Yeah. Once you're in, right? Lateral movement stuff. Well,
and regarding the historical retention of the information, so if you like to achieve that one, I would recommend to go ahead with custom tables instead of watch lists, because watch lists will be automatically cleaned up if, for example, a role assignment will be removed, so it will just show the data as it is to the specific time. But if you like to have the historical data with all the retention that exists for Microsoft Sentinel custom tables, then there's also a description how to implement EntraOps with data collection rules.
I didn't think about that. You're right. When it updates that table and you doing a version control or write, it's gone. You're right. There'll be no data unless you keep a backup of it or something. Run a logic app that says before updating this, write a copy of the watch list to this, and then. But if you put it in a DCR, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, but even if you don't use Sentinel, the repository with all the commit history give you also a way to browse back to a state when on a specific day the role assignment exists or not.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, this is super helpful. I'll tell you, if you're in a medium size, or obviously security value is there, but when you're in an organization where you got thousands of identities, something that can boil this down for you to make useful information out of it, to give you something to do a temporal pivot on, right? In hacking, what thing do I pivot on and say that's proof? Let's go that route. So this is good. We got to get it set up right. Just play around the lab.
Yeah,
we'll let
I'm
Ray
excited
do it.
about this.
Yeah,
I want to do the other thing. I want to take it
Yeah.
to the next level. Let's help Thomas. Let's help him fill out his whole security copilot section. So,
Oh yeah,
Cool.
by helping Thomas, we help ourselves. There you go. Well, Thomas, thanks so much, sir. We really appreciate you taking
Thanks for
time
having
out.
me.
And it's been a long time trying to get you here. I know that we definitely would have had you on earlier, but you had holiday. You know, and we appreciate you allowing us to work around your schedule. I don't know when I'll be in Germany again. I'll get close if we're going to meet somewhere over that side, unless I get picked up for the Berlin Marathon. Roy, you want to run the Berlin Marathon together?
I'll do that. I'll run the wall.
We'll do it. We'll do it. Well, everyone, thanks for coming on to this week's show. This was super, super, super good. We got learned up today, as they say in the South. And thank you, Thomas, again for coming on. Thanks, Ray, for coming on. She's a trooper. I know she wasn't feeling well today. And everyone, big shout out to Brody out there golfing or something, playing and he's working. So next week we'll be back, and we'll have Chris Newberg on, right? So I think he'll be on.
Yeah, I won't actually be on the show next week, unfortunately.
That's right. You'll be out with
busy.
a guest appearance. You and Morton come on, show your face, and pop off.
I'll do it.
Me and Ray
I'll bring Morton on. I'll bring a few people on with me, and we'll crash the party and then we'll leave. Just like
me and Ray hold it down. We've done it before. We got it. Thanks everyone. See you next week.
all right. Goodbye.
Thank you.